Occultism. What is it really? What do people actually mean when they use this word, and what lies behind it? I want to explore this with you properly, and I have a proposal for you at the end. Because something needs to be said, even if it feels like a voice crying in the wilderness. If you spend any time on social media, TikTok in particular, you will find an extraordinary flood of content devoted to occultism. Countless creators, mostly young women but also middle-aged ladies, utterly convinced they possess some hidden knowledge and determined to share it with the world. So let us get our terms straight from the outset. The word occultism refers, obviously, to a form of knowledge that is not available to everyone. Stripped of its history and its baggage, the concept simply describes esoteric knowledge, knowledge tied to a process of initiation, accessible only to those who have undergone it. In itself, this is not necessarily sinister. If we think carefully, virtually every great religion has always contained an esoteric dimension, a body of understanding transmitted only after initiation, reserved for those who have passed through a particular threshold. This was precisely the logic of the ancient Eleusinian mysteries in Greece, and that same logic, in various forms, runs through almost every religious tradition humanity has ever produced. So when we speak of occultism today, we are not speaking of that. The category is vast. It encompasses magic, alchemy, astrology, and much else besides, phenomena with wildly different roots and wildly different histories. The crucial point is this: what we lump together today under the heading of occultism was, for most of human history, not separate from religion at all. It was embedded within it. This is true of the Greco-Roman world. It is perhaps even more true of the monotheistic traditions. We should not forget that the Talmud, the foundational text of rabbinic Judaism, carries within it a stream of what we might call magical thinking that flowed into the Western world across the centuries. Much of what we now call occultism or magic has deep roots in that tradition. Similarly, Islam passed through an analogous phase. Alchemy returned to the Christian West largely through contact with the Islamic world around the turn of the first millennium, a world that was itself absorbing knowledge from Byzantium, from Persia, from the further East. And the Christian world? When I speak of alchemy in the West, and I have written about this at length in my book on the Canticle of Creatures of Francis of Assisi, which I encourage you to read, it was transmitted and developed almost entirely within the Church. The great alchemical treatises were written by friars. These practices we now call occult were, until very recently historically speaking, entirely at home within Christian experience. Think too of astrology or astronomy, since for most of history the two words described the same discipline. The Magi followed the stars. They read what was written in the heavens. And yet those stars led them to Christ, to the one who unites heaven and earth. I rather doubt that the self-proclaimed witches and occultists flooding TikTok have any intention of leading their followers to the Redeemer. Because the occultism we face today is the child of a very different moment. Let me trace the lineage briefly. There have been several great phases of occultism in Western history: the ancient world, the Neoplatonic moment, the Renaissance, when an explosion of desire for hidden knowledge produced a revival of esoteric thought. But the true origin of what we call occultism today is the 19th century. In that century, a West already in profound crisis of faith, Catholic, Protestant, it made little difference, found that religion was speaking less and less to the soul of its people, and especially to the soul of its new elites, the rising bourgeoisie. Into that vacuum stepped figures who spread a new occultism. But this new occultism was fundamentally different from the old, because it had been severed from its religious roots entirely. I will not speak today of Freemasonry, though it was certainly a powerful vehicle for esoteric knowledge between the 18th and 19th centuries. I want to focus on two names that are essential to understanding this transformation. The first is William Blake, a man of extraordinary genius, who used that genius to subvert the deepest foundations of Western civilization. Drawing partly on Milton, whose Paradise Lost, I always say with some frustration, is far too little known in Italy, despite being perhaps the single work that has most profoundly reshaped the Western soul. Blake enacted a radical reversal. In his writings and his art, it is Yahweh who is the villain, the tyrant who has imprisoned the human soul in matter, and Lucifer who is the liberator, the one who would set us free. Behind this lies a shadow of Catharism, a shadow of Gnosticism, and much else besides. The second name is Éliphas Lévi, in reality a pen name, a Hebrew-sounding pseudonym adopted by a Frenchman who had studied Catholic theology, became a Freemason, embraced socialism, and ultimately rewrote the rules of Western occultism. He invented the modern image of Baphomet, of which I have spoken before and will speak again, and produced a body of work that stripped away any genuinely Christian dimension from esoteric thought. He also effectively reinvented the tarot as we know it today. From there, the next step was the theosophy of Madame Blavatsky, who was rather more explicit. Her thought, steeped in a radical, deeply anti-masculine feminism, made no secret of its admiration for Lucifer. The journal of the Theosophical Society she founded was called, quite simply, Lucifer. And so the vast inheritance of alchemical, magical, and astrological knowledge, however imperfectly we describe it, was captured. It became the exclusive property of a worldview that is, at its core, Gnostic and Satanic. Now, Christians do not believe magic can be good. I will leave the Jewish world aside for the moment, but on the Christian side the prohibition is absolute. What is striking, however, is the sheer number of people on social media today who embody not so much a fascination with the magical as something else entirely, a total hatred for the West and its tradition. The parallel is impossible to miss, and you can verify it yourselves. These purveyors of occultism are almost invariably also purveyors of radical feminism, anti-Christian hostility, and contempt for Western civilization. Rebellion. Subversion. All the symptoms of the malady I describe in my forthcoming book, The Malady, this sickness of self-hatred that has entered our very bloodstream. Occultism, in other words, is the diseased soul of a West infected by this hatred. So what can we do? I promised you a proposal. For those who believe, pray. Pray seriously and persistently, because this assault on the soul of our civilization demands a response in kind, a response of genuine spiritual energy. For those who do not believe, bring light. Cultivate awareness. Understand what is actually happening. Because if our history is marked by monks and nuns who prayed for the soul of our civilization, who sought, in all the imperfection of our humanity, to unite our earthly experience with the mysteries of the eternal, then what these movements are doing is precisely the opposite. They are drawing the deepest part of our souls towards archetypes of self-destruction. They are seeking to separate the human from the divine, man from woman, each of us from our own transcendent dimension, all under the pretense of liberation, while offering nothing but a different form of chains. The word occultism today describes, in practice, a Gnostic and Satanic tendency. We must oppose it with the light of awareness, with the clarity of those who understand that these things damage not only those who practice them, but the whole of society. And we must respond not merely with criticism, but with light, the real thing, offered to those who are being led only into darkness. Subscribe to the channel, and please pray for me and for the many souls being drawn into these occultist currents.